So I've decided to go against typical horror conventions for one of my main characters, since I've chosen to make my victim a teenage boy. And this is really unusual for horror films where teenage girls are typically used as the protagonist or the victim, such as Casey in the 1996 horror film Scream. My character of Andy still has many relatable traits to Casey despite being a guy. This is really to try and kind of break the typical helpless female victim stereotype and prove that some males are just as vulnerable as females in these situations. Whilst being in the minority, there are still horror films that have a male main protagonist which Andy takes inspiration from, such as the character of Jim from the 2002 British horror film 28 Days Later. So we'll start off with Jim. Whilst Jim doesn't actually die during 28 Days Later, compared to Andy who dies within the first 2 minutes, they're still in a similar situation at the start of their films. Jim wakes up alone in a hospital and begins to walk around a deserted London, completely alone and isolated from humanity, with no one around to help him. Likewise, Andy is alone in the forest and cannot find help in time, despite trying to run away from his situation. Whilst Jim calls out hello numerous times, Andy is simply too scared to even yell for help. However, the key difference between Andy and Jim is how they react to being in a threatening situation. This is where some of my negative representation comes in. Both characters are put into a fight or flight situation. For Jim, being the typical man he is, punches the zombie that's running towards him, trying to attack him. Andy, however, when confronted with Slender Man, simply turns tail and runs without a second thought. Now, this is a lot more similar to the situation Casey is put into. She too is alone at the start of the film with no one around to help her, just like Jim and Andy. She receives a mysterious phone call and proceeds to play a horror film trivia with her life on the line. After failing a question and being told she's going to die, Ghostface gets into the house and tries to kill her. Even Casey has the courage to at least hit the antagonist when brought face to face, but Andy simply runs. Overall, I feel I represented Andy in a rather negative way as I show vulnerability, but this is to provide more insight to teenage boys compared to the typical, hard, independent, dominant characters represented in movies.